On the evening of February 22nd, 1978, at about 10:30 p.m., a 92-car freight train of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, or L&N, was passing through the area of downtown Waverly, Tennessee. Waverly is a very small town with an average population of about 4,000 people, give or take. And at first, it didn't seem like something that was going to be a major deal. I mean, it was annoying, obviously, but no one was actually hurt in the derailment. It's just one of those things. So the local emergency services were handling it, in addition to L&N's own wreck crew. Because there were some tank cars involved, and they were known to be carrying some hazardous materials, namely liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, one of the initial concerns was a potential leak. They began inspecting for any hazardous material spillage, whether it be in the air or on the ground. The specific tank car involved in this incident was numbered UTLX 83013, and was owned by the Union Tank Car Company, a railway equipment leasing, maintenance, and manufacturing company headquartered over in Chicago. Those involved assumed that this particular tank car was a double-walled tank car, meaning that there was an extra layer of protection from any potential leaks. But 83013 was only a single-walled. But even with this, at first it didn't seem like there were any problems. There was no detection of any kind of hazardous materials. Early in the morning, at about 5:10 a.m. the following day, February 23rd, there had been a bit of a miscommunication regarding the hazardous materials, though. Someone thought that the crews on the ground said that there were some present, so the Tennessee Office of Civil Defense, or TOCD, which was the precursor to the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, or TEMA, opted to send out a hazmat team to assess the situation. But when they got there, they realized that, oh, there aren't any hazardous materials leaking. Oh, okay, our bad. But, hey, they were there, so they were gonna help. After discussing the issue with the local officials, they concurred that they were handling the things appropriately. They were being cautious, making sure there was no leakage, and they had opted to keep the tank cars cool by spraying them with streams of water. This is routine, as if there is a crack that can't be detected, well, heat can cause certain hazardous materials to expand and make the crack worse and possibly explode. And you don't want that. So, erring on the side of caution, they were keeping them damp. Another precaution was that they decided to evacuate an area of about a quarter mile around the derailment zone and disconnect all gas and electric service to the area. Again, just in case. They were going about this very methodically and very appropriately to make absolutely certain that nothing terrible could possibly go wrong. I mean, with all this, what's gonna happen? It's not like there's gonna be a horrifically awful explosion here in about another day or so, but the L&N wreck crews would begin clearing the debris off the line, and then included that tank car. 83013 had originally been somewhat buried in the debris, and when they got to it, they moved it clear of the tracks, as it was obviously pretty beat up and could no longer travel down the line. By 8 p.m. on the 23rd, they had cleared the line enough that they could partially reopen things to move traffic through, and by 1 p.m. in the afternoon on the 24th, they had sent out an LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, like I said, specialized cleanup crew in order to handle that specific tank car. They wanted to get the LPG out of the tank car before actually moving it any significant degree, transporting it, because, again, it was damaged. So the safest thing would be to remove it and put it in something that wasn't damaged. Again, totally reasonable thing to do. However, one factor that was going into the situation that wasn't considered was the temperature. When the derailment first happened, it was very cold out, between 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, -7 to -1 degrees Celsius, and there was a half-inch of snow on the ground. But the temperature changed quite a bit by the 24th. It had spiked all the way up to between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 and 16 degrees Celsius, with very clear skies, and the sun was shining. So it was a nice day, but that meant it was much hotter on the car. Within an hour before they would plan on removing the LPG, they again tested the area with gas detection equipment to make sure there were no leaks. And at that moment, there weren't any. Local police and the fire department were on the scene, and the hazmat crew was also moving its own equipment to start the transfer, but then at 2:58 p.m., suddenly, vapor was discovered to be leaking from that tank car. It's hard to say exactly how they would have reacted. I imagine they probably started the process of dealing with an actual ongoing leak, but it was too late. This all happened extremely fast, before the authorities could actually do anything. What's known as a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion occurred. This type of explosion is generally pretty intense, and it's directly caused by the rupture of a vessel containing a pressurized liquid that has reached a temperature that is much higher than its actual boiling point at normal atmospheric pressure. This happens because, under normal conditions, when the vessel, in this case the tank car, is intact, the liquid inside, the LPG, stays a liquid because of the pressurized nature of the tank car. But if the integrity of the car is compromised, and it was, the loss of pressure drops the boiling point of the LPG, and that could cause a portion of the liquid to start boiling and turning into a vapor. A rapidly expanding vapor, and if that vapor is flammable, and LPG is very, very flammable, and winds up coming into contact with an ignition source, well, you get a problem. The blast was so powerful that people felt it hundreds of feet away and could see it from miles out. It disabled all the firefighting equipment that was already on the site, and one piece of the tank car would land in front of a house about 330 feet away from the original blast. The explosion would result in numerous fires and destroyed multiple road vehicles and other rail cars. Because all the emergency equipment on site was utterly annihilated, more had to be brought in. At least 250 emergency vehicles came to the site, some driving all the way from Nashville and even Memphis. Air ambulances arrived to take the worst of the burn victims away for treatment, and the evacuation radius was expanded to a full mile, just in case a second tank car exploded. The firefighters on site were able to get things back under control by 7 p.m. in the evening, and they began searching for any bodies. They weren't able to continue doing that when it got dark, but they started again the following morning at 5:30 a.m. on the 25th. There was another fire that happened the following day at 3:15 p.m., but that was a car that was loaded with paper product, and it was brought under control extremely fast, so it was basically a non-factor. There was a second LPG car that was on the site, but that one did not sustain damage and was emptied by 10:30 p.m. The nearby residents were allowed to return to their homes by 8:30 a.m. on February 26. A total of 16 people died as a result of that explosion. 6 of them were killed instantly. Among the casualties were both Waverly's fire chief and police chief, Wilbur York and Guy Barnett, respectively. The TOCD state investigator, Mark Bellew, was also killed, on top of members of L&N's rec crew and some local residents. 43 others were injured, with varying degrees of severity. 16 structures within the town of Waverly were effectively flattened, with 20 more seriously damaged. Both of Waverly's fire trucks were also destroyed, because they only had 2 of them. Again, this is a small town, they didn't need more than that. Now they had none. And in total, the damage was estimated to be about some $1,800,000. That's equivalent to a bit over $6 million in today's money. Naturally, an investigation soon followed into what the heck went wrong here, because up until the explosion, it seemed like the local authorities were doing pretty much everything right. And yes, they were, but the issue was mostly with the tank car itself. The NTSB did their own formal investigation and did place full blame on that blasted tank car. They found that a crack had developed when the car was damaged by the derailment, but the crack at the time wasn't enough to actually cause a leak. It was one of those cracks where it's still tight enough to maintain the pressure, but it is damaged. What is suspected is that when the car was removed from the tracks, the crack expanded while it was sitting there awaiting for the gas to be pumped out. This resulted in the pressure slowly dropping enough to cause an overpressurization within the tank, and eventually resulting in the single-walled tank car failing completely and the catastrophic explosion. The NTSB did compliment the town of Waverly because they conceded that they had handled this extremely well. Their response was prompt and appropriate, but they did call for further training for those responding to these kinds of incidents in terms of how to handle hazardous materials, as well as citing the fact that, hey, why'd that only have a single wall? Guys, hello? That's not good enough. This accident was one of the catalysts resulting in a major rework regarding emergency response regulations involving any kind of hazardous materials. Tennessee as a whole would create a new set of standards and what they called the Tennessee Hazardous Materials Institute in 1980, specifically for the training of hazmat responders. And since that institute came into being, there have been absolutely zero fatalities for emergency responders at hazmat sites. So it does seem like the rule change has helped. It was also one of the events that pushed President Jimmy Carter to found the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, via executive order in 1979, that same year. But regardless, it was one of those days that the town of Waverly will likely not soon forget. It was a deadly and horrible accident that probably could have been avoided if the tank car had not sucked. Now seriously, the tank car, it's hard to blame the people involved here. Only the people that chose to use a single-walled tank car to hold that stuff. No, that... It exploded! No! Absolutely not. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.